turn all this stuff off. How's everybody doing? Thank you for the host. Cheers. No coffee, drink, Satan. Today, oh god, this is going to be a rough one, huh? But I think we've got at least I've got an angle maybe that not a lot of people are talking about when it comes to the whole Activision Blizzard sexual harassment culture that's just, it's everywhere in the gaming world these days. So I've got my lights on, I'm all bright, this is weird. So this culture is everywhere, and like for the last several years, this has been happening at Ubisoft, and we've had lots and lots of reports, and it seems like they haven't really done much about it because the people at Ubisoft have just released a letter in support of the Activision Blizzard employees who did their walkout to protest the conditions of the working environment, and those conditions being, first off, women get paid less for the same job when compared to men. Black women especially get paid less, and then the marginalized groups like transgender, LGBT plus people are discriminated against in the fact that they are paid less than other employees. That's the tip of the iceberg. Beyond that's the treatment and the sexual harassment and stuff like that. So Ubisoft came out and they released a letter saying like, we stand with you all. And people are saying like, hey, these conditions still exist. So why are they so pervasive, and why do people think that it's just the way it is and we can't get rid of it? And I think one of the things is the way we talk about this is almost like a way to excuse the people who are involved, because every time stuff like this comes up, get rid of this, I don't need it, I don't need to hear myself talk. Every time this stuff comes up, we get these raid, yes, thank you very much for that, cheers. So every time this stuff comes up, the news articles and even the lawsuit said that it was a frat boy bro culture. It really feels like it excuses it, because these are grown fucking men. These are grown men. They are not idiot bros who still have hormones floating around. And even then, it's completely unexcusable. Like when there's, rapes at a frat boy house or something like that, completely unexcusable. Those people should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law as grown adults. Like a lot of times you'll see like the people being like, oh, he just raped one girl. Don't ruin his entire life. He's a good boy. He goes to church. He goes to fucking church. No. No. Because the damage they do to the people they harass and the people who they constantly... It's like they have this view of other people. When people abuse others, it makes me think that they don't see them as humans, or they don't see them on the same level. They're like, these people are others. Like women, they're others. Minorities, they're others. They're on a lower level. You know what I mean? It's like... When they look at them, it's like, no, they're here for my amusement. It's like, it's almost like, okay, like Logan Paul when he went to Japan and stuff, and he was running around and just like, ha ha ha, oh, I'm so funny. He's like, all these idiots who are here are for my amusement. They're not actually people. They look different. They're funny. They got funny faces. They got funny customs. They got really weird food. They eat like fucking strange, chewy, pig's feet and stuff like that. What the hell is this? They're here for my amusement, and they don't see them as human. And I think a lot of the frat boy culture that happens at these places, it's because a lot of the people in charge look at others, minority groups, women and stuff, and they're like, okay, well, they're not as smart as us, they're not as good as programmers or whatever, and they look down on them. And it's a disgusting culture, because they see people as something other than people. It's like they look at women and it's like not people anymore. And I think that's really fucked up. Thanks for the follow. So anyway, I think we need to just stop saying frat boy culture, and we need to say grown ass men who abuse others and abuse their privilege, and because these things have real repercussions. Like one of the girls on a business trip with Activision Blizzard killed herself. She killed herself. Her boss was there, and her boss brought along a bunch of sex toys. This is how the story goes. And he was doing a bunch of stuff, and he had compromising photos of her, and he was sharing them around with other members of the team, basically just completely objectifying her. She was denied. A lot of people have been denied promotions and stuff like that. And then what happened was she killed herself, and then after that happened, they kept sharing the nude photos of her around. So, yeah, they don't see people as humans. Anyway, here's their Cosby suite, and we won't even get into how fucked up that is. But can we all just agree, no more frat boy, no more using the term frat boy? That's like an excuse for grown-ass men to act like animals? No. No, it's not. No more, stop using that term. Commander Sterling was completely right when they said this, talking about the frat boy culture. So anyway, let's talk about the response to this, and let's talk about what can be done, because I think one of the things that Jim Stephanie Sterling said that I don't completely agree with was that there's not what, it was kind of like, there's not much we can do. But I think there are things that we can do, but we have to figure out where the root of the problem lies and then see how we can address it from that angle. And of course, the management, right? Like, there's Bobby Kotick. Look at this thing. Oh, look at him. Look at what. This is like the least flattering picture I've ever seen. Oh, he looks like a monster in a fantasy movie from the 80s that you just want to behead. You just want to take out your broadsword and like, it's over. I've ended this monstrosity. Yeah, anyway. So, of course, their initial response was written by a war criminal. Just scroll down, there we go. Fran Townsend, right? So Fran Townsend was a Bush administrator for Homeland Security advisor, and she was in charge of excusing a lot of the behavior that went on in Guantanamo. She supported it. She's a war criminal, and she was obviously hired by Activision Blizzard because they saw, oh, we could use this kind of expertise in our company. And she released a statement right after this happened, and she was like, this presents a distorted and untrue picture of our country, including factually incorrect and out-of-context stories, some more than a decade old. Okay, so what's out of context about sharing nude photos of a work colleague who was so under duress that she committed suicide? I'm sorry, that's out of context, Plus, that was like a decade ago. If it was like a decade ago, it doesn't count anymore. You didn't speak up for this long. Why not? Or are you afraid of losing your job? Well, that's what happens to a lot of people who come forward. And then, after the walkout, it's like, oh, wait a minute. The people who program our games are not going to program our games anymore? Bobby Kotick, as I saw Dave tweet the other day, he can't animate for shit. He can't design a game. This guy? He's not designing shit. The developers are who's designing stuff. They need you. They cannot work without you. So as soon as the developers at Blizzard decided they were going to do a walkout, then they're like, whoa, wait, it's a little bit tone deaf maybe. And, they come out and they're like, we're going to try to do stuff. And we didn't know. They're always like the bosses, like especially over at Ubisoft. They were like the same way, like, we didn't know about this stuff. It's like, we would never do stuff like that. Oh, would you never do stuff like that? Well, right here, you just, in 2007, lost a sexual harassment lawsuit. So you don't know about these cultures in your offices. And what was even funnier about this is like, this is a whole fucked up case. You can read about it. I'll put a link in the description when this video goes on YouTube and stuff. But you can read about this. But essentially, when the girl complained about how toxic the work environment was for her, they fired her because she was creating the toxic work environment by not being an escort. One of the employees was like, you need to be my personal escort as we go around town and stuff, and like, you need to hold on to my arm. And she was like, I'm not going to do it. So they made her life hell and then fired her for creating a toxic work environment for complaining. So that's what happens to people when they complain at these companies. But then they're like, we don't know about this stuff. We didn't know that there was this culture at our. You are the culture, dude. Like, that's part of like who you are. You are exploitation. That is this face. That is the face of exploitation. You can have $1 billion, but the more you exploit, the more your face shrinks into this ogre turtle thing. You look at this across the industry. Jeff Bezos is starting to get it now. He's starting to regress into his ogre troll state. It's just science. Okay? All right, let's move on here. So, of course, they're always like, oh, we don't know. That's more stuff about that. And guess what else? Kotick is in Jeffrey Epstein's little black book. You can't write this shit. And, of course, he's still going to remain the CEO of Activision Blizzard. And, of course, he's still going to get $150 million a year. You know what he does to earn $150 million a year? You know how he gets that much money? Whenever it comes time to show the stockholders and the board how well they're doing, he fires a whole bunch of developers who rely upon this job. They need this. They need this money. He fires them all because then it makes their their revenue look better, because it's like their expenses go down because they fired hundreds and hundreds of people. And he shows them and he's like, look, we're doing so well. Look at that profit to loss ratio, and look at that revenue, and look at the fact that we're not spending a lot of money. We're doing all this with just a few developers. And the board goes, good job, $150 million. Here's a bonus on top of that. And then he has to go back and rehire new people every year. And they don't even see the developers really as people, because they use the term bodies in the industry. They're just like, whenever there's something wrong, they're like, throw more bodies at it. Just throw more bodies at it. Like whenever they're having a problem with a game, they can't get it finished. Literally, these CEOs on record have been heard saying, just throw more bodies at it. That's how they see this. Anyway, after all this mess, they came out and said, listen, we're going to address this. It's okay. We're going to look into this. We believe that this needs to be addressed, because that's the only way they see. The only time that they would ever do stuff like this is when it came to a point where they have to. And that's because their employees are not working. And their employees don't work. They're like, okay, now the thing that's going to cost us the least is going to be to like say that we're going to take care of it, and then at the same time we're going to hire a union busting agency to come in and make sure that they don't unionize. So if you weren't following this, the employees of Activision Blizzard have some demands. And one of those demands is that they want to know what everybody is making, not like an individual basis, but they want to know for like each job, like, are white dudes getting more money than like a transgender dude at the same level? Who knows? What about a transgender girl? Are they getting the same money as, they just want to know if the same compensation is being given for the same positions depending on your gender, race, and all that kind of stuff. Are they discriminating? They want to know that. And they want to know a few other things, and they want some protections in place. So when they start making demands, Amazon, they call up the same person that Amazon hired to bust firms. So this company here, let me just bring them up. And scroll down. I'm going to look into this, but it's called Wilmer Hale. And Wilmer Hale, why are they using my name? Those bastards. They've got some really interesting techniques that I find, they're disturbing, but they're also like stuff that you would see in a movie. This is on the record here, like all this stuff. You can read about it, but I'll just summarize it because I've already read it all. So one of the things that they do is they offer some like clandestine services. These are like the CIA of union busting. They will install plants in different places to talk to the employees and be like, if we form a union, the union dues, they say they're going to be one thing, but as soon as they hook you, they're going to be 3 times what they actually said. And then, you may actually have to work more. You may end up making less after all this is said and done with. Unions are going to make your life hell, man. They've literally planted people on buses to sit behind employees and whisper like, hey, listen, I know about this union thing. I've been around the block a few times. They literally do this. It's part of their campaign. They have people, they're like the modern day Pinkerton, which became our modern day police. Pinkertons were like the people that the bosses back in the day hired to run around with sticks and beat up people who asked for livable wages and stuff like that. So yeah, isn't that fun? That's what they've done. That's how they've decided to fight this, by hiring the same union buster that Amazon uses to make sure that they can exploit people to the maximum amount, because the more you exploit, the more profit you have. And I feel like a lot of this entire culture comes from the type of people who are just pure capitalists. And, capitalism, it was not really seen as a positive thing until like the 60s. It was seen as kind of an insult. And I'm not even going to be anti-capitalist right now, but I just want to say that like there are different, types of people out there. There are some who value capital over everything. And then there are others who value products and art and the quality of their services. and there are indie studios out there who are in both categories. And I find that just in general, you see this sort of like just rampant capitalism, exploitation, trying to find the most predatory monetization policies possible and implement them to make sure that you're tricked and make sure that people who are susceptible to have gambling habits and stuff, make sure that they click on your loot boxes and stuff like that. Whenever you see that, whether it's indie or AAA, you usually see a more toxic culture because of the way they see the world. And this exists outside of just capitalists. You can have like someone who's like an artist who doesn't give a fuck about money and just wants to do this, and they're still a terrible toxic predator or whatever. That exists there, but you really see it becomes very prevalent when you look at like just any major corporation. And this culture is not exclusive to the gaming community, but it seems to be, I guess, maybe allowed to go a little further than it should, because the PR ramifications haven't been as negative as they have in some other communities. And maybe that's starting to change a little bit. And I haven't gotten to the whole like how I think we can solve this yet. But I want to give a few like personal stories because I've worked with billionaires. I can't say who. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to out them. They were pretty cool to work for. But I've also worked with some multi-billion-dollar companies. And I've worked, when I was at Tiger Direct, I was hanging out with a lot of the CEOs all the time, and they invited me into all their meetings and stuff. And when we traveled, they would all travel together. And of course, it was just like exactly what you're seeing here in a lot of these reports. When I read these things, I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly how it was when I was working at this other company. You know, it's like nothing changes when you go from one company to another. You get a bunch of idiots in the room together who just care about like money and exploiting people, and they're gonna look at minorities and women in a similar fashion. So when I was at that company, I'll give you a couple of stories. I'm not allowed. I don't want to say specifics, not because I give a fuck about the company, but because I give a fuck about some of the women who are involved in these things. But like, as soon as you get to another state, the CEOs, the first thing they do is to be like, all right, where are we getting the hookers? Who needs a hooker? And like, they made so much fun of me for not getting a hooker. It was like, what's wrong with you? You don't want a hooker? You don't want to go to strip clubs and get hookers? And I was like, no. Is that okay? And they were like, oh, you're gay. Is that it? What if how about we have some guy suck your dick? Is that what you want? And it was, they wouldn't stop. So it was like, fuck. So I would just be like, I'm going to go to my hotel room and do weird goth shit. And they're like, look at you gay. You're going to go do weird stuff. We know what you're going to do. And they would just joke nonstop. But a lot of them would bring along like a female worker or a female employee. And I remember one time we got back from this event, and I was called into the HR department. And I was like, why am I in here? And they're like, hey, we're writing you up. And I was like, why? And they were like, oh, well, you forced this girl who works for the company, you forced her to leave her hotel room because you're a diva and you needed 2 hotel rooms. And you told her that this is your hotel room as well. And I was like, I don't even know what's going on, but fire me if you. I don't know what's going on. So I went around and asked questions like, what's going on? And like, so apparently one of the executives was like, hey, you're staying in my room tonight. And the girl was like, okay, because there's that terrible power dichotomy. So she stayed in the executive's room that night. And the room was empty, and some people found out about it. And it's against company policy for someone to stay in somebody else's room, and that was like an issue. So in order to make sure that it wasn't a big deal if any stories were to break, they pinned it on me and said that I was the actor diva who was like forced her to not sleep in her hotel room, so she had to go somewhere. So thankfully this gracious executive was like, that asshole, god damn that asshole, you can stay in my room and everything's safe. So that's the kind of stuff that goes on all the time. I've got like 20 stories, but I'm not going to go through all of them because it would be ridiculous. It's like you see it everywhere in this culture. So how do we fix this? Well, I think the walkout is a big deal, and I think people need to be more vocal, and developers, they need you. Developers, you don't need this asshole. You need the money, which really fucking sucks. Like, especially if you're living in California, if you're living somewhere where like the prices are just astronomical, you need that money, but you don't need this asshole. So walkout, the least thing you could do is demand in your contract the ability to sue. Because when you join these companies, they always make you sign a contract that says like you'll agree not to hold them responsible, and not to sue them. You need to just say no to these contracts. And if everybody, everybody can just do that. If everyone out there can just say, listen, we're not going to stand for a contract that says we can't sue if we're sexually harassed, or we're not going to stand for a contract that says we're not going to sue if I'm transgender and you're giving me a totally different pay schedule based on someone who's not. That we're not gonna sign anything that says we're not gonna sue. I'm sorry, this is this guy on the screen. It's Bobby Kotick. Ugh, get him off the screen. Stop signing those contracts. Do not sign them. You have power because you have talent. And they're going to tell you there's a lot of people out there with a lot of talent. And that may be true for some of the jobs. But for a lot of the jobs, if they want to hire you for your talent, they're going to hire you. And just stand up for yourself. You're powerful because you're the creatives and they need you. I don't know if we're ever going to get them to not put money above everything else. I don't think that system's going to change anytime soon. Sometimes it's easier to see the end of the world before we can see the end of capitalism. So we can just stick together because there's power in numbers. They got a lot of money, but so that's my only ray of hope. I know I said that I was not in full agreement of James Stephanie Sterling when it comes to this kind of stuff and do I see a way out? But it's a small one, but I wanted to have at least a ray of hope, an array of light. If you can get together with some of the people who work there and just have enough for a couple of years, it's maybe you have to move to the middle of nowhere or something like that, and you can work on your own indie project. I'd love to see those. And we need to start supporting indie developers who have good culture. It's not, some of them have toxic cultures. That's a thing in indie as well. It's a thing everywhere. When is capitalism good? We could go on a whole thing about that, but I don't know when it's just focusing on money as the bottom line is ever good. And for anybody out there who doesn't understand what capitalism is, capitalism doesn't mean you sell stuff. You're not, if you have an online store or you make money from something online, or you do something, or you I don't know, you make little artisanal widgets at home and you sell them on the street, that doesn't make you a capitalist because you're getting paid. Capitalism is a system of exploitation. That's the whole point of it. It's a system where you give someone a wage and they do work for you and you have to make more than their wage. So therefore, there's a little bit of exploitation built into it because it doesn't make any sense for you to pay someone less or pay someone more money than the value of their work. So that's the whole point of this thing is people do work and someone at the top gets the value of that work while they go home with a very small piece of that value. So that's how it all works. I'm not saying, it's good or bad. That's just the system that we live in. So you understand? That's what capitalism, that's what makes it different than other systems. That's what makes it different than, systems in the past. It's a system of exploitation. That's pure and simple what it is. And you can argue in the comments about, how good or bad that is. Anyway, I think I'm done talking about Activision Blizzard. Everyone stick together. Demand a better environment. And, stick to your demands. Walk out. I know it's kind of scary, but losing a few days' wages versus, potentially making the industry a better, safer, more, equal environment, it's pretty cool. And keep calling this stuff out. And again, to reiterate, stop calling it frat boy culture. These are grown men, and sometimes there's women involved in that too. When I worked in Tiger Direct, my ass was grabbed a lot. But it was mostly dudes. So even then. But yeah, that got kind of old pretty fast. I developed this weird phobia of standing at someone's cubicle. I would always stand at an angle because someone will walk by and just be and just pinch your ass, and you're like, what the fuck, man? So I had to literally now when I stand places, I'm make sure my ass is not facing anybody who can grab it. That's from being in that corporate environment.